You're listening to Mystic Lounge with Alan B. Smith. Rebroadcast on the Onyx Network. Thursdays at 11 p.m. Pacific. Fridays at 2 a.m. Eastern.
However you are and whenever you are, welcome back to Mystic Lounge. I'm Alan B. Smith. Joining me tonight is author and scholar Stephanie Rose Bird, the author of The Healing Power of African American Spirituality. And thank you all for continuing to support this podcast and the Coffee and UFO podcasts. If you enjoy this episode and any of the past episodes, please support this YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mystic Lounge by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing, because organic shares really make a difference with helping the channel grow. So I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. All right, I've got my coffee ready tonight, and we're going to go on a spiritual journey with our guest, Stephanie Rose Bird. She is the author of 5 published books, including Sticks, Stones, Roots and Bones, Hoodoo, Mojo, and Conjuring with Herbs. Her writing has been published in numerous magazines and anthologies, including Natural Home and Garden, Herb Quarterly, Sage Woman, and Llewellyn Herbal Almanac. She graduated with honors from Temple University, Tyler School of Art, and received an MFA from the University of California, San Diego, where she studied visual arts. Stephanie has been a member of the College Arts Association, Fulbright Foundation, Chicago's Artist Coalition, Woman Made Gallery Advisor Board, Society for Shamanic Practitioners, and International Center for Traditional Childbearing, Black Midwives and Healers, and so much more. Stephanie, welcome to Mystic Lounge. How are you?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I'm really excited.
Well. Doing very well, thank you.
And I should say Priestess Stephanie Rose, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. So is that how you see yourself, as a magical priestess?
I do.
You do.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, being, quite the scholar that you are too, do you ever find a little, internal conflict between the more rational, studious and the supernatural, natural world?
Absolutely not. And I think that the ancient priestesses and many contemporary priestesses are also scholars. So, yeah, I don't see any conflict whatsoever. I think it all goes hand in hand. I tried to think of the title that is most befitting for all that I do, and priestess is the one.
Okay, that's fantastic. Yeah, oftentimes people refer to themselves as either like neo-pagan or, witches and that sort of thing, sorcerers, whatever.
Yeah.
Do you think that the title is that important? Because your book focuses specifically on spirituality from Africa, how it came through the diaspora into the Americas, South America, etc. And so I would imagine that appropriation of terms, doesn't matter which culture, could be somewhat problematic or not.
Do you think that priestess is an appropriated term?
Absolutely not. No.
Yeah, I just don't see, it's something that occurred to me really just within the last week when I had to reframe myself for some new bios that I'm putting out. I have a book called African American Magick that is coming out in the 1st of June, and from Wiser Books, and some other activities that are going on, Sacred Waters Retreat and so forth. And I reframed my bio, made it much shorter and more succinct. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you're saying herbalist, witch, aromatherapist, on and on, eclectic pagan, on and on. What is the concise way of saying this? So I realized that it was elder priestess. And so that's where I'm sitting and resting at the moment.
I like that. Yeah.
Things could change.
Some people will call themselves druids, right? And it's kind of it's a neo-druid, because I don't think the druids of long past would really relate exactly to, the modern druid, because there's so much,
Yeah.
like we incorporate so much of other religions and cultures into our, spirituality, most prominent, you could probably say in like the New Age movement. Um, do you think that that's a good thing, that we kind of, pick a little from here and there and incorporate it into our own life?
Yeah, I don't know a terribly large amount about druids, but I do know, I think that they're very serious and on task and dedicated to their path. And
Hmm.
I don't see that they need to necessarily be called neo druids because they're just druids,
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I hope I answered your question. I sort of like wander in and out of spiritual realm and so forth when we're talking. So
So
reel me back in.
drifting through the veils,
Yeah.
kind of. So we'll talk a little bit about your book, right? So
Yes.
can you tell us first about like Kemetism and Cometians, which is often referenced in the book?
Yes. I find so much soul food, so much I don't know, spiritual fulfillment and interest and um, knowledge in those paths. So it's not, I don't claim it as my path, but
Hmm.
I definitely want to share my excitement and exuberance over the paths and that knowledge. When I was in art school and I took many art history classes, and I actually, my TA-ship was in art history. And I would always, particularly though, when I was studying in school, I was like, wait, what about the Egyptians? You can't just like brush over them so quickly. That
Mm.
what they were all about is so important. Let's rest there for a little while longer. But that never really seemed to happen in the classes that I was in at that time.
Hmm.
So yeah, I want to be sure to share what I know and what I am excited about in those paths. I was
Right.
just like called recently to an Isis. I saw a beautiful Isis statue, and I'm like, yes, that's what that's what I need to add to my home. So
A little more ISIS in your
next,
life.
yeah.
Yeah. So the Cometians, I mean, historically, what is the root of that? That's of the belief and the traditions.
Well, Kemet was a place, and it is a path that is based in what we now call Egypt broadly.
Hmm.
There are many different practices that I go into more, a little bit more specifically in the healing power of African American spirituality.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's just a very rich and magical um, spiritual path and type of spirituality that I think that people, whether you dive in fully and that becomes your path or not, it's something that deserves attention and honor in its
Hmm.
highest form. So,
You kind of referenced yourself as like a tree hugger. I I can relate, because I've literally hugged trees, right?
yes.
And like, have you had that experience where
Oh
you
my,
kind of feel like a calming in your solar plexus?
oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I really like, in several of my works, the A Healing Grove. Actually, I've done more than 5 books too. I think on 8, 9, and 10, because some of my books are being brought back from out of print, but at least 8 books
Hmm.
I have authored. But in A Healing Grove, it's all dedicated to um, African connection to trees, and a lot of a bit of memoir is in there, a bit of my own life and path with the tree. So it's in that book. It's Sticks, Stones, Roots, and Bones, talks about tree whisperers. And, that is the ability to understand the language of the trees. And
Mhm.
it's something that I've been mulling over and working with in works of fiction, and I have done it again and again. It's like a thread that rolls through my works is trees. But I had a particularly strong relationship with an elm tree when I was growing up, and I would do my homework in it. Had these like really big, welcoming, open arms. I would go there when there was discord in my home for peace. And I just wrapped my body around those great big branches.
Yeah.
And people knew where to find me for dinner. My dad would come walking out
Yeah.
down the path and find
Mhm.
me, and bring me again, like reel me back in to reality, and
Mhm.
to their reality, I guess you would say. So yeah, definitely tree hugger.
So when you say back to reality, as you kind of referenced earlier, do you see something else? Do you literally kind of like see beyond the veil, or is it a state of mind?
I I traverse different realms and planes, and I've done it like through my painting, which is abstract, but definitely vibes off of like plant energy and tree energy. Um, I don't need any kind of like wuska or like any brain altering materials, because just like to get into the rhythm of nature
Mhm.
is um, takes me really far. Yeah. And that's like kind of where also the shamanism comes in, another one of my um, titles that people have debated over, like, what does she mean? What's going on
Sure.
here? Isn't that
Mhm.
like belong in a different um, heritage than her own?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I like to go into the different realms
Mhm.
in whatever manner I can. And I do it through meditation, I do it through touch, I do it through sounds of water, sounds of wind, all of that. So,
And I mean, just the term shamanism, isn't that it's not that's a Western European term. I forget where it was pulled from, but it was kind of appropriated by the anthropologists, of like, the French and
yeah,
English,
that's
right?
what I mean. That's why I've been trying to refine and clarify how I
Mhm.
describe myself, because I think that when you're just um, exposed to so much here, we have a grab bag of ideologies, thoughts, practices,
Mhm.
and that's why I am now Priestess Stephanie Rose Bird, rather than a melange of different titles:
Yeah.
hoodoo, witch, eclectic pagan, shaman. Um, yeah,
I
I
think
just,
one thing that I found really intriguing was that you highlighted the Gullah people,
mm,
right, of
yeah,
South Carolina,
yes,
and I, I was not all that familiar with
hmm,
their culture, and it really is fascinating. It's amazing how much they retained,
yes.
right,
Hmm.
spiritually. So, can you tell us a little bit about the Gullah people? Um, and I'm saying Gullah people like they're from another country, but the
Yeah, it's a
but they
fascinating,
have a unique
beautiful.
culture.
It's a very unique culture. I
Mhm.
won a grant and was able to go and sort of hang with the people a little bit
Mhm.
on various islands. I was really attracted to the angel oak tree and all of that kind of mysticism and power that those trees hold.
Mhm.
But the people, actually, this is really not silly, but my first boyfriend was a Gullah person. And
Your first boyfriend?
yeah, he would
Wait,
tell
was
me.
this in New Jersey?
Yeah, he would tell me
Wow.
that he was. It was for him. It was a point
Yeah.
of embarrassment. I didn't know at that point anything. You know, you're like
Hmm.
a really young teenage person, so you don't really. I don't know, but right away I was interested in what that his mother. He said dyed her hair with coffee and tea and
Mm.
mixed with henna and things. And I was like, what? This is like really fascinating. So I wanted to know more. This guy was a scoundrel, though. So,
Ah,
we
yeah.
soon parted ways, but it opened my eyes to a whole different culture that I wasn't that familiar with. Although we also had a family friend that was a Gullah person.
Mm.
So,
So does
we
that mean they weren't necessarily just North Carolina?
oh yeah, in South Jersey and New Jersey generally, like a lot of my cousins have moved to North Carolina. Like there's like a little path, it's
Mhm.
like Virginia, North Carolina, like and then like further south. But there's definitely actually the Gullah and Geechee are more South Carolina. So mhm. And I just, they have really rich traditions as herbalists. I love their weaving that they do. I have purchased what I could to be supportive of their basketry and such. And
Mhm.
um, yeah, they are people that were enslaved like the rest of us, but through perhaps isolation with the various islands,
Mhm.
they were able to retain a lot of Africanisms. And now many of us look to them for their wisdom. We appreciate them. And there's definitely like that I told you, boyfriend, wacky taffy. But there's nothing like to be embarrassed about
Mhm.
whatsoever. I know everyone goes through their thing as
Sure, yeah.
teenagers, but I think probably growing into an mature person, he also like has probably gone back there and
Mm.
been nourished by the wisdom of the people there. So
Yeah, growing up in Jersey, did you, grow up with the folklore of the New Jersey Devil as
yes.
well? You did? Okay.
Mhm.
Did you have anybody that you knew that claimed they witnessed it?
I
'Cause
think
there was
some of the
always someone, I feel like.
Yeah, I think some of the kids at school did,
Mhm.
but I can't remember anyone specifically. There's also the Hook Man. That's a lesser
Mhm.
um, folkloric character, but also was quite important to us growing up. The Hook Man and
Uh-huh.
um,
What was the Hook
the
Man?
Jersey Table. The Hook Man, he just like had a hook for an arm, and he would run through the woods and do like scare the hell out of people.
You
And
sure it wasn't a real man?
I don't know. I
Sounds
have,
like a real person that I've, kinda met before. Um,
but
but yeah, at
like
first you said I thought you said Wolf Man, but you said Hook
no, the
Man.
Hook
Yeah.
Man.
Mhm.
But like with the Jersey Devil, that is another folkloric um, character I would call, for lack of a better word, at this very
Mhm.
moment. I have woven him and his lore into my YA fantasy books that I'm writing. So
Oh, cool. Very cool.
definitely had a big impression on me.
Um, can you talk a little bit about I think I'm pronouncing it right. Is it Ashe?
Yeah, Ashe.
Ashe, okay.
Ashe, Ashe,
Yeah.
Ashe, Ashe. Yeah, has, it crosses various language groups, because that is another word that I don't know why, but I wanted to know, even though I've written about it extensively, I wanted to know what people are saying now as the definition. And I feel as though it's the power of making things be. And so in that way, it's sort of like totally different paths, but like in witchcraft, we say, so mote it be. Like some people who are listening might get that, like, but other people from the African diaspora will get ashe, but they have some sense of commonality to them. And that's something that,
Is it like an energy, or
yeah, it's like a energy force of, it's the power of making something whole that is just ethereal, making the power to make things be.
would it be akin to like a manifestation, or it helps to manifest things? Is that?
It is. It's just like, it's really complicated. And ase also is a word connected to ashe, which are the power of words to manifest.
Mm-hmm.
So there are ase words, there are ashe words.
And the original, it came out of Africa, right?
Yes, but like various places in Africa, the terminology that I use in my books is more or less connected to the Swahili, but it also is spoken of in other language groups, meaning different things.
Vodou and voodoo.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the same thing, or we're just saying it wrong?
I just feel like voodoo is a little bit Hollywood. It's a little bit like, let's like scare people, whereas voodoo and voodoo with the OU at the end is more respectful and more akin to the Creole that it grows out of and grew out of. So,
and both of those grew out of like African religions.
West Africa, yes.
West Africa, okay, yeah. So, would witchcraft and magic? It seems to be something that humans have done worldwide, in various formations. In your studies, what are the things you find the most common between different cultures in ritual?
The desire to sort of like traverse the other planes, and also to know what happens to you when you die. All of those like holistic questions: why we're here, where we're going, what is it like, those kinds of things.
Okay, so we're talking about trees, and then in the book you talk about the Yoruba people, who created these like sacred groves of trees.
Yes.
So our idea of sacred usually is just kind of a place you go to and pray, or meditate in, a place of reflection. But for them, it was incorporated more of deities and other aspects of protection, right?
Yes. And it has reverberated across seas over here. Even during the time of enslavement, people would go out and create their own sense of the sacred in the forest and do ring shouts and things like that to cultivate and both like pull in and honor spirit of nature. So,
do you think that modern people, we have lost too much of these spiritual practices? I mean, obviously, African Americans, were kind of forced in a way to have lost a lot of their heritage. But as a suburban and urban people, all of us? I mean, are we missing something? And are you hoping to kind of bring something back?
Yeah. But first of all, I want to retract a little bit. Like,
Mhm.
I feel like that has been a fallacy that we lost our heritage and our connection to Africa
Mm.
because it's so much there. It's
Well,
so
you're right. Yeah, it's
yeah,
not.
it's so present.
Yeah.
But I understand also what you're saying because
Hmm.
like I remember um I don't know, it was like 20 years ago. I had this beautiful elm tree in my front yard here where I live in Illinois. And the guys were coming to the tree forestry people were coming to cut it down
Mm.
completely. And I was just devastated. Like for them, it was just like a job. And I understand, working and, it's your job. I
Mhm.
get that. But I told them that I was going to tie myself off to the tree if they wouldn't like leave it alone. But
Mm.
I have little kids at that time and everything, and I had to like resign myself to this is what was to be. But wherever you go, there are pockets of people. Like even when I went to Australia, and I don't mean even as though how could it be, but I just mean so far away from where I'm from.
Mhm.
I found people that were deeply connected to spirit and to the old ways. And
Mhm.
wherever I go, Tennessee, like people think of it like more as a like the Bible Belt and um, you know really immersed in Christianity. But I found pagans alive and well there, like just doing really beautiful things in their neck of the woods. So I think that the people are always to be found, and we're sort of like we are a tribe
Mhm.
all over the world.
Outside of like the visual arts, painting, sculpture, etc., do you feel like the media in general doesn't do a well enough job of representing, what your book talks about? These different spiritual heritages that were passed down. I mean, just from where I sit, just watching the news, watching TV and movies, listening to the radio, even with Black artists, I don't glean that much, right, in the way of,
Mm,
like, the spiritual,
mhm.
life. That's my perception. Am I right or am I wrong about that?
Well, I mean, like there are many different kinds of spirituality
Mhm.
amongst the Africans and the
Yeah,
American,
I should qualify
Yeah,
that with
but you're
not Christian, right,
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 yeah, or
yeah,
Muslim,
or
because
Muslim,
there
right.
are a
Mhm,
lot of Islamic people as well.
mhm. So
Yes
the
and
answer
no.
is we're missing something in representation then.
Um, I Yes, but like I said, you can always find the people that
Mhm.
are involved in it. Like when you read my bio, I think the that group has now changed their name, but like the Black midwives and doulas are just like these really powerful, connected people to the earth,
Mhm.
and yeah, they're just like different like little groups that you can find, musicians, Erica Badu, like just
Oh,
different
yeah,
people,
yeah. Well,
so
that's true.
but it's
I'm
few
glad you
and
said that.
far. It is like
Yeah.
it is I just try to just stay, really positive and
Mhm.
not get too down about things, but I understand your question and where
Yeah.
you're coming from with it.
Yeah, no, it's right that you
Even
say that
even
about.
the leaves are nodding now, they're
They
like,
are, I can
into
see
it.
that. That's so
Yeah,
funny. Yeah.
yeah,
I had an experience when I was 16. I was in my bedroom and at that time, I was just really in tune. Like, how you go through periods, just kind of like more in tune. And I talked to my plant as a palm plant and it shook. It literally just, my windows weren't open.
yeah,
And it kind of, sure, you can come up with a million explanations. Maybe there's some kind of reverberation coming through the floor that I didn't notice otherwise, but it was uncanny.
Yeah,
that happen.
that's really cool. You know, there are some scientists and studies that are being done about the language of the tree. So, like pulling it over into like more of a
Yeah.
Western and scientific conception, but
Mhm.
that the roots all like are in communication and speaking with each other in the forest, and
Mhm.
things moves are made like almost like politically, like you have to go and this one needs to come up,
Yeah.
things like that with the trees. So I find that really fascinating.
Oh, it really is one of the most amazing things about having a relationship with nature. It's something that you can feel if you let yourself feel it. And I
Yes,
think, like, back to what I was saying before about, suburban, urban. Um, a lot of people just, they go to their jobs, they get in the car, they come home, they go to work, they go on vacation, but they don't take. I mean, they don't take the time to just go out to the woods and like, or get close to nature or plant things.
yeah,
And I think, the more we have that in our life, the better
it
for all of us.
is.
Yeah.
It is really great. It's just like sometimes people, ill-intended people, make it difficult for particularly people of color who, if you're living in parts of Alabama or Mississippi or
Mm.
South Carolina, that's one thing. But like if you're in a major city and you want to go out into nature, sometimes it seems prohibitive. It seems like, how do I do that? And how will the people be there? Because you always have to go through the people to get to the place.
Yeah.
So there's still trouble there. But I feel really fortunate, like where I grew up and who I grew up with. Like my father was not at all a church man.
Mhm.
I think he did become more religious at the end of his life, though.
Mhm.
But when I was a child growing up, like he was all about the lake where that was our front yard.
Mhm.
And it's really like when I was living there at that time, I thought, I mean, you don't really appreciate it as much as I do now looking back on it, but I still knew it was special. All of our relatives would flock down to that little tiny humble place, and their souls would just get so filled up that
Yeah.
even as a child, you could see that. But he was very still. He was a fisherman. He stocked the lake, didn't have to. No one paid him for it. He just did it. He raised and lowered the dams. He would watch like how the weather was
Mhm.
going to be, and sometimes one time we got flooded, but that was only one time that I can remember, and that was even cool because I had to take a rowboat to connect over to where the school bus was.
Mhm.
So there's lots of ingenuity within him, and my mother was like great at like canning and like growing things and
Mhm.
preserves and cooking, and a lot of that is also like right in my books. Um, yeah, they were
There's
really
so
neat
much
people.
information in your book. I just want everybody to know it is packed with not just herbal information, but food information too. It's fantastic. And it was one interesting thing, uh, was I was reading that you were mentioning that sea vegetables are like 10 to 20 times, have more vitamins and minerals.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, they're really really cool and accessible and inexpensive.
Hmm.
So
Did you ever go to Bass River State Park when you were young
I
in the Pine Barrens? That's where we went most of the time for, day trips
no,
and
we just went to
no.
we went to like Parvin State Park.
Okay.
Um, but I don't think that we went there. The
Mhm.
main sojourn we did was to the ocean,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
to like
you
Fortescue and Cape
yeah.
May and places like that.
That's, it's funny you say that because another thing I learned from your book was the, Himalaya salt lamps, right? The lights.
Yeah.
I see some of these guests, my guest next week who, he has, uh, these, lights behind him, those pink and so many like metaphysical spiritual people have them.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was just like something that people thought was kind of cool looking
Hmm.
and not as expensive as like a crystal quartz. But
Yes.
but you brought up the fact that it can deionize
Yeah.
a space, so it can
Yes.
counteract against like the electronic pollutants
Hmm.
from. And now I'm thinking I need to get one.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, I have one in the living room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Now I
yeah,
can give them as gifts.
It's a great idea because now it has so much more meaning than just
Yeah.
something that's lovely in your space.
Hmm.
And you mentioned Erica Badu earlier. We
Hmm.
just a few days ago, my wife and I were watching. I forget, it was like one of those interior design channels, and she was giving a tour of her studio, and like she had just like so many various like art pieces and instruments, and
Yes.
she and ritual too, like how she goes
Hmm.
into like her sauna and her tub, and she talks a lot about like being barefoot and being grounded. uh
Yes.
yeah, so what are your thoughts on that, people spending more time bare feet?
I love it. I do it as much as possible. My kids do it. My son, my daughter. I think they all have their little dirty feet, and they're grown people now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that was my summers. Winter was for shoes and boots. Some
Mm,
spring and summer, my feet would get toughened from the tenderfoot to getting toughened, and I would
yeah.
be in bare feet. And I still love to do that in my garden here, even though this is like it's like a urban suburb.
Mm,
It's very very close. It's like really close to the city, but I still do it. And you hear these reports about, oh, like what's in the soil, but like I don't know, what's in the shoes. Like I like to ground myself with the earth, so I'm down
yeah.
with that completely.
Yeah, totally. When we went to the beach, we would walk on the asphalt,
Yeah.
and because it would help kind of like acclimate the bottom of your soles, so they would get a
Yes.
little bit harder, and you can walk on stones and sand, and
Hmm.
it wouldn't bother you as much. Like we would
Yeah.
literally just walk on the asphalt just to get that effect, so that we would strengthen our feet.
But I think, yeah, the body becomes like a lightning rod, like up through your souls. Like there's so
Mm,
much about
yeah,
the soul, and these are souls. And I think that you can conduct a lot of earth energy through the soles of your feet. So
yeah. So
now
we
it's called earthing.
earthing. That's
Yeah.
yeah, right. It should just be called humaning, but
Yes. Yeah.
um, I did when I was a teenager. There was just an independent like a musical that was developed, by someone, and we did a performance. It was just happened to be in Atlantic City, which was not far from where you grew up, and
Yeah.
the sort of fool on the hill character of the play, has this whole song and this thing about you know lying on his back and showing the bottom of his feet to the sky.
Mm, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and so can tell us a little bit about how you perceive that sort of ritual, and how what's important, what's symbolic, that's important about these kind of rituals that we go through as humans, we develop as cultures.
Do you mean with the earthing
Well,
part or just
anything, any of that, yeah. Like, because we teach each other ourselves. Okay, take the time, put your feet to the sky. Take the time, put your feet to the ground. Hug a tree, light a candle. Say these words.
yeah,
Um,
things like,
why is that so important?
oh my gosh, I just think it is what feeds the soul of humans, regardless of race or culture. Um, it's what feeds us. And we need that nurturing, or you kind of die and you're just like a husk.
Hmm.
So,
So it's like a
um,
nurturing.
yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like, yeah, the one also that came to mind while you were speaking was water rituals, like because they're so accessible to us. And you and I, you asked me about the lake. I told you about my lake.
Mhm.
Thought about the ocean, and but even just little things like collecting rainwater, collecting lightning water, doing making salts for the bath, like all of those kinds of rituals, like connect us back and enrich so much.
The lightning water, how does one get what lightning water?
Well, you know, during a thunderstorm,
Hmm.
you would put out a bowl or even a bottle and just
Hmm.
collect water. Then you can make a sitz bath. This is hoodoo. You can make
Hmm.
a sitz bath in the tub and sit in it to bring fast changes into your life. So you can also do floor washes with it, add a few more ingredients or use as is, and just wash off your countertops. Like all of these acts of bringing nature into the home, exposing your body to it. It
Hmm.
just it's magic. It's sort of like inexplicable because it's magic. So
Yeah. Well, I know after a lightning, a thunderstorm, there's have you ever got that metallic, almost kind of a smell? I've
yeah.
always loved that smell, and it's called ozone. And I wonder if that chemistry actually has some kind of effect
Mm.
on the water as well.
Yeah, it could very well. I believe
Uh,
so.
so,
Yeah.
do you have a particular religion that um, you incorporate most in your practice?
Mm. You know, I'm just not religious at all. I'm very spiritual, and I know
Hmm.
that's something that
Spiritual.
people
Yeah.
say, but
Hmm.
yeah, you know, I like more of the earth-based spiritual practices, also folkloric practices like hoodoo. So religion, mm, not so much. I try to share though, like, you know, I like to, like, in my 365 days of hoodoo, I want to share like what the original informants of hoodoo um, shared with the world and
Hmm.
future generations, and some of that stuff is Christian. So um, you know, it's related to the Psalms and things like that. So I will share information like that, like in my more traditional hoodoo book. But other than that, no.
The spiritual practices of ancient Egypt, did that like trickle down to other parts of of Africa? Or was it more like, things kind of like evolved, up to Egypt and then back down again? Like how did
I
do we
mean,
see
you know,
traces of it in other parts of Africa?
yeah, I mean, it was like a really larger area, the sort of
Hmm.
like cradle of high civilization. So there's places like Punt and Timbuktu, and um, so they're like kind of spread around. It isn't just Egypt. And I think that the way of envisioning deity has spread through the diaspora.
Hmm.
And you know, sometimes you have to be really careful about how you speak about Africa, even because there is a large part of
It's
it that's very like Islamic,
Oh yeah.
Christian. So often I try to like clarify that I'm speaking about indigenous African ways.
Hmm.
Um, or I used to call it traditional, but I'd say it's safe to call it indigenous African ways. And um, there's something, you know, it might be from the connection to the sun, like the sun that activated all of our melanin and made us all of these different beautiful browns and
Hmm.
black. Um, I think that there is, just like in Europe, there's a way of engaging and eliciting deity and spirit that you can feel across the board.
The Ivors Papyrus is from 1552 BC,
Mm,
and it's the oldest preserved medical document.
Yeah.
And that came out of Egypt.
yes.
Right. So how far advanced do we think that they were in their, with their physicians?
Just,
When we talk about healing with herbs, like
yes.
in the book you discuss how the difference between just taking an herb, right? Because like the New Age shop down the store says take an herb, or a commercial tells you to do it, right? And it's the alternative to a pharmaceutical,
Right.
versus something else that's imbued with a more healing power.
Yes. Yeah. And I think a part of that comes from that relationship with plant magic, plant energy, like being grateful, being thankful for the plant's life that you're about to consume. Like there's just like a whole almost ritualistic way of thinking about putting those things into your body. I got a little freaked out, I have to tell you, during COVID when everyone was like, really like take, let me take some herbs to not get COVID. And like that illness scared the heck out of me as much as anybody else. But
Mhm.
I did get disconcerted with that. Like all of a sudden, I was like, is elderberry going to get completely depleted? Like
Yeah.
echinacea and like um, you know, many other plants that I also like will list out in my books, like in the African American Magic one that's coming out. There's like a list of like fragile, extinct, to watch plants. We have to be respectful. We
Well,
have
it's a
to be
little bit
respectful.
like a foxhole prayer, right? It's I don't really believe in this stuff, but I'm gonna take whatever I can just in
Yeah.
case it,
Mm.
it works.
I was
Right.
surprised and shocked with how many
Yeah.
people were just like grabbing, or not how many, but like people that I knew not to at all be engaged in nature, spirit at all that
hmm
were.
There's oftentimes there's that conversation where um, uh, non-people of color like myself, look to other cultures, Native American, African American, whatever, and see something that I like that I want to incorporate into like my rituals, my life.
Yeah.
Where's the line between like it's okay to incorporate different aspects of spirituality and crossing a line to like purely just abusing and misunderstanding appropriation?
Yeah, it's
Because I have no
a
problem
respect
taking from the
thing.
Celts. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it's a
oh,
respect thing, it's like
hmm
respectful, but also like now in African American culture, we are closing a lot of our practices because we have actually, to circle back to earlier in our conversation, we
hmm
have had a lot sort of like attempts of beating beliefs and practices out of us. And then all of a sudden they're okay, and but only if we do it. you know, like the midwifery that we're pulling back on. And yeah, it's so yeah, we are closing practices, and then open practices are open to all, and the closed practices stay with us. So,
ah,
and I know a lot of other cultures do that too. I know Native Americans,
yeah,
for example, do that.
yeah, that makes sense. So you're saying that's kind of a new approach or way of sort of managing one's sacredness, or
I think it has come up in the cultural conversation
hmm
because, it's not just with our spirituality. It's like people, countries are reclaiming their sculptures and their spiritual objects, and they want them for the communities that they came from. So whereas before, like people would just, you could go to a museum and gawk at certain things that were sacred.
Mhm.
Now people want them back. So,
Yeah.
but I think that there's also beauty in sharing, and I try to be as open as possible in my books
Mhm.
because, um, yeah, like racial tension is so high, and we misunderstand each other. We're doing all kinds of things at all times.
Yeah.
So um, I try to like still be open minded, at
Mhm.
least, even though some of the practices now are closing in.
I guess that makes sense, right? I like the idea that it's like, okay, we'll share this.
Yeah.
You can do this. That's cool. Like I would imagine, like there's already millions of people around the world that have their own, way of praying to or worshiping Isis,
Yes.
or Newt, uh,
Yes.
and that's people of all over the world, look
Hmm.
to like the ancient Egyptians, to incorporate that into the spiritual practice because if nothing else, the symbolism, the spirit embodiment of that deity seems to help them, or
Yeah.
it's purposeful, and I think there is something beautiful about that because we're always looking back. I have a very mixed background, adoption on one side, foster on the other side, Irish, Scot, Irish, Italian, Dutch, this and that. I other than being raised Catholic, which I don't, believe in, I don't have like a linear kind of tradition that was like passed down,
Yeah.
right? We were very kind of like an amalgamation, just kind of the, you know, American and
Yes.
just that, that mix of things. So, I like people like me, we look and go, okay, what's out there?
Mhm.
What can work for me? You know?
Yeah. Well, interesting that you would bring that up because, and I hate to be one of those people that's always like touting their books, but I have
Go for it. Tout
spirits.
away.
Spirits in My Bones is going
Mhm.
to be coming out of Llewellyn, and it is a book on how to engage when you find out that you have all of these different kinds of bloodlines. Like, how do you appreciate that in your magic? Like, how do you? So it's a hard book to write, but
Yeah.
I have like I'm connected to almost every race um, on Earth that I've found out through extensive DNA testing and my
Mhm.
genealogy and so forth. So I've thought about it, and I think that a lot of people, especially with those tests now being available, are thinking about it. So I wanted to join the conversation in that way.
Yeah. I've been talking about this a lot with my wife because I am curious. Those genetic lines. What might surprise you? I think that's just
Yeah.
kind of the fun aspect of it. And you mentioned Bulgarian rosewater,
Yes.
and multiple times in the book, and she's from Bulgaria.
Oh,
So we're quite familiar with. They're the largest producers of
yes.
of roses.
Oh,
Yeah.
and it's so beautiful, that
Oh,
rose water.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love
and you make a great
roses.
point. It's not just a pretty flower. It is, but,
Yeah.
it's all like, what are some of the herbal benefits of rose?
Roses are both stimulants and relaxing. Um, I feel that a lot of their quality is definitely spiritual in terms of like opening you up to different possibilities and ways of thinking. They
Mhm.
bring peace. They do a lot. Yeah.
And we're both doing a little rose tonight too. Got the rose
Yeah.
there. You got
I
the
did
rose
that,
on.
before
Yeah.
we began, I
Mhm.
sprayed myself with a peace water I made
Oh,
with some
okay.
women in Tennessee, and it is a large component of it is rose water. So
There you
interesting that
go.
you would bring that up.
Yeah.
I put it on because I was sort of like getting lower in energy, but I also wanted to stay peaceful. So there's very few things that will work in both ways, and rose is one of them.
My magic elixir was coffee.
Yeah. I'm drinking tea as well.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah.
Stephanie, if you can leave us with one thought tonight, what would it be? Anything you want.
I mean, the first thing that came to my mind sounds kind of corny, but I would just say love each other. Love each other, love the earth. Don't pollute her. You said one thought, so it's about love. And I think it's the rose that made me come to the love. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Love it always comes back to love on this podcast somehow, one way or another.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Stephanie, thank you so much for joining tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this.
All right. And if everybody appreciated this conversation, please go to stephanierosebird.com. I put the link in the comment section as well in the show description. If you listen to the podcast, wherever you listen to your podcasts, please share your thoughts on tonight's podcast and be sure to like and subscribe and rate. All right. Thank you once again, everyone, for joining on Mystic Lounge, rebroadcast on the UNX network Thursday nights, 11 p.m. Pacific time, 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fridays. And until next time, everyone, peace and love, and live in the mystery.